meeting to order, and we have 3 closed session items this evening: public employee discipline, dismissal, release, public employee performance evaluation, superintendent, and conference with labor negotiators. And we are going to adjourn to, is there any public comment on closed session? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn to closed session. At return from closed session, we have nothing to report out. So we'll begin our business meeting promptly at 6 o'clock. And please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Everyone is here except for Melissa Messina, who is absent this evening. Notice to the public, if you would like to speak on an agenda item, please let us know. Non-scheduled agenda items will be introduced under section 10 on the agenda. Recognition of guests and presentations.
None this evening?
All right, and correspondence.
None.
All right, so we've moved on to the consent calendar. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none, is there any board comment on the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
The motion, the item has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. We will do a roll call vote. EJ?
Aye.
Luke?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
And I as well. Consent calendar passes. And we have no items pulled from that, so we will move on to our stakeholder communications. Luke, go ahead.
All right, so hello, everyone. I am excited to announce that as of today, the final group of students have made it into the hybrid model, which means that the whole district is fully integrated into the hybrid model. The transition wasn't very easy, but I am proud of my fellow students and teachers for being flexible and adapting to such a new environment. There's always room for improvement, and we're looking forward to seeing positive growth moving forward. Dixon High athletics are underway and making the best of a condensed season. A number of fundraisers have been put on by the Dixon High leadership, and the current fundraiser is a Krispy Kreme sale that will benefit every grade at Dixon High School. That's it for today, and thank you.
Great, thank you. Citizens Oversight Committee, is there anyone here? Anybody else here to report on that? Oh, all right, seeing none, we will move on to our employee association reports. Kathy, go ahead.
Good evening. So April Fool's Day might lend itself to some fun and games, but I'll resist that urge. I won't make fun of anything or surprise anyone. ETA unit members are very happy to be seeing students and catching up with them in person. We are thrilled to see students who have not been as engaged remotely being on campus to try and reconnect with school. We strongly encourage those who still struggle with distance learning to wear their masks and come to class. DTA appreciates that the district is working to provide appropriate PPE and to follow the safety protocols outlined in our MOU. We do, however, want to remind the district and our community that we are not out of the pandemic, so consistent and thorough adherence to these protocols continues to be expected by our members. We are also working with the district to iron out some glitches while keeping our members and students as safe as possible. We wish everyone a safe, healthy, and smart spring break. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Are there any other employee association reports this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to parent association reports. Are there any parent association reports? Michelle, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Just a short report from the Tremont Parent Association. We had a Kona Ice fundraiser a few weeks ago. The owner was gracious enough to drive the truck around to a few different locations in town, making it easy for people to go access the Kona Ice instead of chasing it all around town, which is nice. We are hoping to do that again April 16th. I'm actually not sure if it's going to be all around as it was before I missed our meeting this week. But that is on the calendar for April 16th. We're also working on trying to schedule our book fair, working out some kinks to try to make that happen for our students as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Any other parent association reports this evening? All right, seeing none, we are now at public comments. If you have a topic that you'd like to discuss that is not on the agenda, please do so at this time by raising your hand. All right, seeing none, we are moving on to our first item, which is the update on the reopening of school in a hybrid model.
Thank you very much. It is, excuse me, really nice to be able to talk about this in not a future tense, but the current situation of having ourselves open is it's just wonderful. And as Lucas said, there are challenges with doing this, but overall, we're very, very pleased with how things have emerged. So I'm just opening up my screen there. Just have a few slides to run through tonight. So we have to begin by saying thank you, and thank you again. As so many people have remained committed to getting us to this point, this board included. And I always make a mistake when I try to start naming people off. So this is the general global thank you to everyone who's been a part of this. And it has come from students and families and all kinds of staff and community as well. So we're just very, very grateful to have our students back on campus. When you get to see them there, it just feels so wonderful. So thank you and congratulations to everybody for where we are now. So as of today, as Lucas said, all of our grade levels and programs across the district are in full operation, with the B group of students today in those grades listed there. Every student who's going to return in person after this point has had the chance to be on campus. So we welcome all of them. And just to point out, we began returning students 6 school days after we returned to the red tier in the county. And we had all of our students back 10 days after that. So I'm proud of the fact that we moved quickly and efficiently to get everybody back. Many of our neighboring districts are after their spring breaks and such. And it's just a good thing for our students and everyone else that we were able to move so quickly. So thank you for that. Overall, things have been running smoothly, we do feel. So first off, our kids have been absolutely fantastic. Following the rules, no beefs over wearing a mask or not. It's hard to stay 6 feet apart. They're doing it well in the classroom. It's hard outside, but nobody is pushing things. It's just really, really great. Every student who, well, not everyone, of the at this point in time, of the several hundred students who I have asked, are you glad to be back? It's yes. It's just a handful of kids who have been wishy-washy. So thank you to the great kids of Dixon. There is ample supply of the PPE and sanitizers. We got all of our plexiglass out. We had a hiccup on our first day at Dixon High that was corrected. But at this point in time, all of our classrooms are fully stocked and set up. Safety practices, again, overall, as Kathy mentioned as well, people are doing a good job. We cannot relax on those. The conditions in Solano County they're not improving right now. They have stalled. And the possibility that they will regress is certainly there. We could move to the purple tier in Solano County. We shouldn't do that. There's no, heaven knows, there's no reason to do that at this point in time. We know what we're supposed to do. And so as a community here, I hope that we can stick to what we know is the right thing to do. And then the concurrent model, otherwise known as Room and Zoom, is in place. So all students are with their same teachers and receiving, whether you're working remotely or in person, you're receiving the same level of instruction, which is terrific. Areas for growth. So we fully understood before we got started and continue to understand that instructional practices in the concurrent model are going to be a challenge initially and evolve and improve over time. I was at John Knight Middle School today, and saw some things going on in classrooms that were just knocked the socks off the blend of working with the students in the classroom as well as virtually. Technology setup and ease of use for staff is an ongoing process as well. Again, watching plenty of people get very creative and use what they have in their rooms. We did purchase cameras, we did purchase Bluetooth headsets and such, but inevitably there are still issues that do emerge. Staffing is a challenge, specifically for teachers, substitutes. We have a very short supply. We have a higher demand for subs right now as teachers are out and other staff as well, but especially with the certificated substitutes here, they're getting their vaccinations, they're having a reaction. It's taking 2 or 3 days in some cases for people to be able to come back to school. So we see that as a short-term challenge. Our long-term demand on substitutes for leaves, extended absences for people has been much lighter than what we anticipated it might be. So we are not really taxed too much on the long-term subs. It's more those that are for absences of a day or 2 days or 3 days. So we also, we have a lot of our classified employees working additional time right now, which is keeping us afloat. And in situations, we also are short substitutes there as well. So staffing remains something of a challenge, which, it's always a challenge to some degree, but especially in these times, it is heightened. Kids are coming back and they're happy and they're engaged, but they're still carrying a lot with them after this year away from the campuses. So continued work on the social emotional supports for them. We have Adrian Lauder and her team have done a great job of getting things outlined. And as we move forward, I think this is one of the areas we're going to be looking at in terms of how do we increase and improve our services to make sure that over the next several years of recovering from this time period, that there are supports there. And activities for students, for the student athletes at Dixon High School, these crazy sports seasons are underway. And, we with football, we had to cancel the first week's game, got the second one in last week. The opponent switched for this week's game because of positive cases up in the school. So there's all these moving pieces, and I think all the sports are doing this. So it's nice that our high school kids have some activities available for them through athletics. But what we don't have are widespread activities for kids across the district, right? And there's limitations on that, clearly because of current conditions and such. But over time, I think it's really something that we'd like to be able to offer our students and their families as well. So certainly want to acknowledge our successes, but also identify the things that we've got to continue being focused on. So the in-person participation rates, the numbers are really great at the 3 elementary schools, and they come in very close to what the parents reported to us in the weeks before reopening. At John Knight Middle School, 54%, that's about 8 or 9 percentage points lower than what parents had reported. I didn't put the percentage on for Dixon High. It was very low in the numbers we had today, in the mid-30s. And I had a question about if the B group attendance was in the system today. So we anticipated that to be closer to 50%. And so we'll publish that number as soon as we've been able to verify it. But I just wasn't entirely sure that everything had been accounted for in the attendance with this group. So, and then at Main Prairie, 59%, which is lower than what their indications were. But talking to Mrs. Ramos, the principal, she thought people just hadn't submitted the form, which I think is probably the case at JK and Dixon High School as well. So the numbers in elementary are great. The secondary programs are pretty typical from what's happening in other areas, although Someone was sharing with me just earlier today about a large size district where the attendance in the secondary levels is only 20, 25, 30%. So very low numbers. We do want to say that we support the choice of every family to stay in distance learning or come in person. But if you have any inclination about coming in person, please do. You know, we're absolutely convinced that the best thing for our students right now is to be on the campuses in person with their teachers, with their peers, get adjusted to this, especially for anyone below grade 12 who's going to be back with us in the fall. Breaking the ice now and being able to establish some routines and practices again. I just can't say enough that I really think there's a benefit to people who choose that way. So we're here, we're ready for you. Come on down if that is what you would like to do, please. And should you have any questions, call your school, talk to your teacher about what's going on, please. All right, we're at a pivot point now. So we've been talking for a year about getting back and when would we reopen, and it's here and we're happy. And we're now at a point while we continue this work about being reopened, we got to figure out what we're doing for the next several years. We cannot get casual about the amount of work that we have to do, the kind of work that we have to do to roll into the 21-22 school year and beyond. It's just status quo, return to past practice will not work. We just know that kids have lost too much through this time of all kinds. So the good news with regards to this is there's money to support us over these next several years. And a variety of funds, state and federal, and our tentative projections over the next 3 years is in excess of $10.8 million. That is a lot of money. It is all one-time money, meaning that we're not going to get additional or repeat funding from these categories unless legislation happens. And I think the wells are probably going to run dry as so much money has been earmarked to support these efforts to re-engage and really reinvent our schools to a significant degree. There are different requirements on the different funding sources, so exactly how things can be used and such. So it's important, it's imperative that we adhere to those requirements. Otherwise, you face the possibility of having to return dollars or pay penalties. So it's not very often when we get to say in a public meeting, we have the money to do what we need to do. But we really do feel that with these large allotments, we can address the needs that we have. So planning and execution. Some of the dollars say you have to complete this addendum or additional plan. Those requirements do not seem too onerous. The bottom line is if we're going to use these dollars well, we've got a bunch of layers of planning to add to our work here. And the integration of that work with the LCAP, and Nick is going to talk about the LCAP in an item or two, is just critical. We have to have those aligned and the resources blended, and we have to look at what are we doing with one-time dollars as opposed to ongoing. We cannot get ourselves committed long-term to a whole bunch of programs or services that we can't sustain long-term. So the ideas around this are just a really, really expansive process that we're going to have to engage ourselves into and involve plenty of people in the work. So the funding, all this one-time funding, the last chunk of it, which is almost half of it, has to be expended by the fall of 2024. So we do have, with some of this, just a year to spend it, and with others, these multiple years. So We are engaged in the conversations now about the planning processes that we have to have using our LCAP advisory, using our budget advisory. How do we fully engage staff in providing input? How do we engage families and students in providing input? So you can look for us to come with more information on this at our next meeting. And then we won't be doing really updates on the reopening of school. We're going to be doing the planning updates on the use of these funds moving forward and how we will address learning loss and everything else. So we've got a lot of work to do, but it's the exciting work of building on what we've got started here in these last couple of weeks and being able to make sure that we are accounting for our future around here. It's good stuff. So I'll take any questions that you have.
Great. Are there any board questions?
Not a question, but Lloyd and I are on the LCAP advisory board, and I'm really glad that we had our meeting prior to this meeting, because now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We had lots of discussion around, spending the money now and then not being able to sustain these things. So it's a real balancing act. And
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Joel.
All right, well,
Go ahead.
so I think moving forward, we need to take advantage of now making the jump from a less technology-centered school to, district, and now take advantage of the fact that we have learned how to use technology for in our advantage. So I think talking about the money and what that goes to, we need to capitalize on the fact that we now know how to use technology to help kids learn better.
Absolutely.
Other board comments, thoughts, suggestions? All right, do an open for public comment on this item. Is there any public comment on this item?
I have a
Right.
question, please. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, Kathy. Yeah, go ahead.
Just, my question is, when will we get some sort of a write-up of what all these funds are? Is there a way for us to get that information, like we're getting X from this and it has to be spent this way?
You want me to take that now?
Yeah, well, let's see if we have any public comment. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and go ahead and answer, Brian.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a great question, Kathy. So we're awaiting a lot of details still. We anticipate the first allocations of a couple of the pots of dollars, the state level ones, to hit us in May. Right now, we're dealing with projections. I don't believe that we've seen any specific numbers come from the state yet. We're also, along with those dollar figures, we really are looking for some guidance on exactly what is allowable in expenditures and what kind of accounting we're going to have to do for it as well, right? So we did a very effective job of spending the first money we had, which is really focused on PPE and all the materials. And we're right now actually not carrying that much COVID-related funding in our coffers. So the money that will come in May will allow us to do the summer work and prepare for next year. And then we anticipate, so that's the in-person school grant, incentive grant in particular, but then the learning loss, the extended learning grant will come in May. A chunk of that will come in May. So we will get that first allotment. There's over $5 million of federal money. We have no idea when that's going to come, quite honestly, and we don't know what kind of strings will be attached with that. So we do have a couple publications from some of the advisory groups indicating here's the categories of things that are legitimate expenditures. But this is the type of thing we'll be working with our auditors and people like school services to make sure that we don't make mistakes and then be returning money or paying penalties. So more information to come. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, We are going to move on to item number 2. There's no action required on item number 1, so we're going to move on to item number 2.
Great. So our annual adoption of our meeting calendar is before the board tonight. And we do have in our board bylaw that we follow the first and third Thursdays of the month. The couple of exceptions where that does not happen are when we are, so we only have one meeting in July. And then in December and January, because of holiday breaks and needing to have the annual organizational meeting after a certain date, we have only one meeting in those months. And then this particular calendar, April 7th, is highlighted because that is a spring break week. And typically we do not meet during spring break or any other holiday weeks. So we would ask for your consideration of this calendar with or without the April 7th. My recommendation would be without. And I anticipate that as we return to using the council chambers, which hopefully is expected to be next month, where we'll be able to go and use the council chambers again. And as people begin to working in person in their professional lives and not just at home, working remotely, that we would revert to our 7 o'clock start time for the public sessions. We can deal with that now or not. But we would ask for you to at least identify the meeting dates and allow us to book those with the city of Dixon.
All right, are there board comments on this item?
Brian, did you say you would recommend doing it without the April 7th date?
Because it is spring break.
Okay, yeah, so I'm sure I heard that.
And I was just gonna say, I sort of think that if we can swing the earlier meetings, that works better for staff, right? I don't know among this group if that seems possible. I think, certainly if I eventually return to work in Sacramento on Thursdays, that wouldn't be possible, but I don't know that that's gonna happen for me. So, so I'm sort of willing to look at a possibility of starting closed session at 5, if everybody else is. And then switching if needed. I mean, obviously, if people can't make it, I mean,
Sure.
that we'd have to switch that. But I don't know what the feeling of the room is around that.
I wonder if we could do like a virtual closed session and then by the time 6 hits, you'd be able to be here. We could start then, something like that, where you don't have to be here all the way at 5, you know what I mean? So, I
Yeah,
don't know if
but
that's possible.
unfortunately, it's the notice, so I would have to notice in my car. And I drive a convertible, so that'd be really awkward, right, with the papers flying.
We are enjoying Brown Act flexibility right now.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
And at this point,
Start it out there.
5 o'clock is not a problem for me at this point. It may eventually become a problem, but I sort of don't think so. So, yeah, so I'd like to see us stay with this earlier meeting. I think it kind of works better, and more, and I think it's friendlier for staff, honestly, as well. So anyway, so I don't know if we don't probably.
No, we don't have
this
to.
evening, but
Yeah.
I think that's something we should sort of keep in mind.
Okay.
If that works for everybody. And otherwise, I'm going to open for public comment on the calendar. Is there anybody who has, in the public, who has a comment on the approval of the governing board meeting calendar for 2022? It's wrong on our,
Mhm.
yeah, it's wrong on our.
Correct on the
agenda.
title of the
Yeah.
document, but it's wrong in the
Yeah,
title of
exactly,
the
yeah.
agenda item.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So is there no public comment? I will close public comment. And do you need formal action from us or sort of an indication?
I don't, well, this really matches what's in our board bylaw of the first and third Thursdays, so it doesn't really require any kind of formal action. If it's your pleasure, you can take a vote.
Everyone wants to keep out the spring break week, correct?
Yes, please.
All right. So I will, and then we'll look at maybe doing the 5 o'clock time until
Sure.
otherwise noticed. All right. So given those 2 amendments, I will entertain a motion on item number 2.
I move to approve without the 4/7 date and the 5 p.m. start time. tentatively.
Perfect. Is there a second?
I second.
Excellent. There's been a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. BJ?
Aye.
Lucas?
Aye.
Jewel?
Aye.
Lloyd?
Aye.
And I as well. That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are on to Mr. Germonti and the LCAP process overview.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
Great. And just going to need share my screen here. Okay. All right. Y'all can see the PowerPoint or the slideshow, yes?
Yes.
All right. So good evening, everybody. Tonight I'm here to talk about the 2021-22 LCAP process and timeline. Brian mentioned that we've begun this work. I do want to point out, as I know a number of folks have been following this process for a number of years, or either at the board level or in the community, that this may feel a little later than we've typically started. I want to assure folks that we're not necessarily just starting it now, but this is when I'm presenting process and timeline, and then also own the fact that we are not as far along as we typically are this time of year, as this spring has been more focused on getting kids back to school and reopened. So that's not meant as an excuse in any way, but just as a, here's where we are right now as we move forward. So just really quick, I want to share with folks, what is an LCAP? It's a local control accountability plan is what it stands for. And it's a function and requirement of the local control funding formula. Without getting into too much detail, essentially how schools are funded in California. And as you can see there, it's intended to be a comprehensive planning tool to support student outcomes. In short, this is our district's strategic plan as to how we're going to meet our mission to ensure all students graduate college and career ready, prepared for global society. So what's required in this year's LCAP especially? A few things that are typical every year and some additionals because it's such a special year. The first is what we call the annual update. We'll actually be looking at the LCAP that was written 2 years ago, basically an update to the board and the community as to how things went. An update on our progress with regard to the learning continuity and attendance plan, the other LCAP that you all approved in September of this year, meant to be a one-year plan to how we were going to essentially get through 2020-21. There will be a budget summary for parents. And then lastly, and this is actually the most important piece, it'll include the district's goals, how we're going to measure them, and then the actions and services we're going to implement to meet those goals. So stakeholder engagement's a big part of this. So our primary vehicle for this is our LCAP advisory group. Jewel mentioned it earlier, as did Brian. Jewel and Lloyd are the governing board members on it. But we have stakeholders from all of our bargaining units, parents, administration, and the governing board. Really thoughtful group, a lot of great participation. Really appreciate what they're doing. Minimally, we meet once a month for 2 hours. We just met on Tuesday for our meeting, our second meeting in March, actually, and we're meeting again at the end of April as it's kind of go time right now. We also look at some additional staff input through grade level meetings that I do with elementary folks, some surveying, any surveying that we do, we take into consideration, as well as staff meetings, either principals conducting staff meetings or last year I was going to staff meetings and soliciting input from all the staffs with regard to their thoughts on our LCAP actions and services. We have a parent advisory group that we must convene. That will be done in April. And then finally, we need to be checking in with our DLAC, that's our District English Language Advisory Council, as well as our ELACs. It's a standing agenda item for our DLAC that they get an update on where we are with these pieces. So our current progress, so 2021-22, so next year, so we're writing the LCAP for next year, will actually be the first year of a 3-year plan. This year's LCAP, if COVID hadn't happened, this was supposed to be the first in a 3-year plan, but obviously everything got moved back a year to account for the strangeness of this year. Does this mean that we simply throw out the old LCAP? No, that's a hard no. I know a lot of folks out there see that question and might get concerned. We have a lot of positions, frankly, funded out of LCAP. A lot of the positive things that we're doing in district are funded out of LCAP. So this isn't that we would just throw it all out and start anew. We know that some of these things are working and we want to keep moving forward with them. But it really is an opportunity for us to reorganize, rewrite, and reconfigure the document. And I'll add to that a little bit later. So last fall, in fall 2019, when nobody ever heard the word coronavirus, the governing board established 3 new LCAP goals to focus our work. and they are that will engage all students in standards-aligned, rigorous curriculum and learning that ensures preparation for college, career, and success in a global society. Goal 2, that we're going to engage all students in social, emotional, and behavioral learning, which ensures safe, healthy, and culturally responsive schools. And lastly, engage students, staff, families, and the community to form active partnerships which ensure the academic and social growth of students. If we want to think about these goals in really short terms, goal 1 is our academic achievement goal. Goal 2 is our social, emotional, behavioral goal. And goal 3 is our partnership goal with our parents and community. I'll point out that all of our sites that do SIPSAs, which is 5 school site plans, which is 5 of our 6 sites, their goals are all, if not the exact same language as these, maybe a little bit different verbiage, but they are all organized the same way so that there's synergy between the site plans and the district plans. So in addition to those goals, the governing board also provided 3 guiding principles to facilitate decision-making. They are that we're going to recruit, train, and retain high-quality collaborative staff, that we're going to responsibly allocate and manage resources, and finally, employ research-based best practices to maximize human, fiscal, and material resources. Some of you who really are paid attention to LCAP over the years might recognize some of these as being goals in our former LCAP, and we pulled them out as goals and made them guiding principles because we really can't be successful in any of the goals if we're not doing these 3 things. These are all essential to achieving any of the things that we're trying to do. So they didn't necessarily feel like goals to us, but really guiding principles to help us make good decisions. So a big part of the LCAP is obviously how we're going to pay for all the stuff that we do. So the LCAP historically is principally focused on how we'll spend what's called our supplemental and concentration grant dollars. The Dixon Unified and other districts like ours receive additional funding because of the percentage of English learners, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and homeless and foster youth. So we, in spending these SCG dollars, need to demonstrate how the actions and services that we are funding with them principally impact those students. It does not mean that those dollars can't positively impact students who aren't in one of those categories, but we better be able to say very clearly, draw a through line between what we're doing and research or data or whatever to show that these students in particular will be benefited as a result of this action and service because we're using these funds to do it. So the majority of the budget that gets spent here in the LCAP will come from the SCG account. We have other funding sources that also should be considered though, if they're appropriate to the goal in the action and service. Things like the general fund, lottery accounts, but also things like our CTE funding. In fact, we're required for some of these grants to include actions and services in the LCAP if we're to continue receiving them. So you'll see CTE in there, as well as our federal dollars in Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. We see all of these funds as ongoing, meaning unless there's a major change to how schools are funded in the state of California or at the federal level in the case of the titles, we can anticipate receiving these dollars year after year after year. They may change as the economy changes, as our enrollment changes, but we don't see them drying up anytime soon and simply going away. And I want to point out that action services are often multi-funded. So you don't just, you have an action service, you don't just have to pick one of these. You may say, well, it meets the goals of this particular grant, but also meets the goals of this grant. So we could pay 30% of this grant, 30% from this one, and 20% or 40% from SCG. Brian alluded to it, the new COVID-related funds, which really is a game changer for us, especially short term. And I am not so proud to think that every single dollar that we're getting from COVID or these COVID-related funds will come into the ELD services realm, into the LCAP. However, we know a lot of them will. A lot of these dollars are designed to help mitigate the learning loss that's happened with our students. And we really feel that as the LCAP is a strategic plan as to how we're going to meet the academic and social emotional needs of our students, that if we're going to use those funds effectively, systematically, we're going to track them, they need to be brought into the LCAP, if only for the number of years that we have those funds. So this is what we do with LCAP Advisory on Tuesday. It really allows us to think about what we do in the short term and near term with our LCAP action services. So we know one option, that first bullet you see there, is that we can potentially expand current actions and services to serve more students. Meaning we have an action and service that's already in the LCAP, we can provide additional dollars to make it bigger because we know we have more need because of what's happened in the last year and a half with our students. The second category is that second bullet there, which is that we know that we've got a real high short-term need with our students because of what they've experienced the last few years, but we don't anticipate this category of expenditures progressing beyond a year or two. We design a program to come in, meet the needs of our students, and then it fades out once the dollars dry up. The third category is I think kind of the most interesting and compelling, frankly, and this is an opportunity for us to initiate new long-term action and services to meet the district's mission. The catch here is this: we know that the funds that we have from COVID are not ongoing. So if it's our intent to have things that become long-term, then we need to identify other funding sources or realize that something else has to get removed from the ledger so that we can continue to afford it. But what it really allows us to do, especially, is think about some of those those things that we wanted to try that may have been cost prohibitive on the upstart level, but that now are things that we can do because we've got ways to be able to cover those initial costs. So what does happen to the current LCAP? Many, if not most, of the current action and services will continue, but they're going to be reorganized under the LCAP goals. I'll remind folks that our prior LCAP had 6 goals. We're now shrinking it down to 3, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that is. But I do want to point out that program scope will be adjusted to reflect enrollment trends. So we know that we're declining enrollment, so it may mean that we need less of something or less of people to be able to achieve the goal that the action and service is setting out to do. How are we going to know if it's working? So we're required to measure the impact of goals, actions, and services as they relate to the 8 state priorities. We've always met this requirement. It's a minimal requirement, but I would be lying to you if this has not been a long-term question, not only from LCAP advisory, but members of the board, the community, our admin team, teachers, et cetera. Finding meaningful, actionable data points has been a concern, and so one that we need to be thinking about. And that's what led us to this idea of going from 6 goals to 3. We really felt like the 6 goals with action and services spread out over a 250-page document, frankly, was somewhat unwieldy from a measurement standpoint. So we're trying to make it a more focused, accessible, measurable plan. We know that we're going to have to continue focusing on some, pardon the typo there, the big data points that you would find in the California School Dashboard, things like SBAC, things like attendance, things like suspension data. But we also want to include more formative data points that allow us to act more quickly, more flexibly, frankly, be more nimble to be able to address student achievement. I think if I could make one sort of, I don't want to make a complaint, but one concern about our current LCAP is it's a fairly unwieldy document and it's really hard to sort of pivot within it. And we want to make something that's going to allow us to be flexible. So our next steps, we're going to continue working with our LCAP advisory. We're going to engage our parent groups, continue to in case of ELACs and DLAC, but also get a parent advisory specific to this together. We need to engage some student stakeholders. I know Mr. Dodora is eager to help us with that. We'll complete the annual update and the learning continuity update to present to the board. I will need to submit a draft to Solano County Office of Education. Ultimately, the governing board will approve the LCAP. Well, I hope you approve it, the June 17th meeting, and then that goes to county superintendent for their perusal and subsequent approval. So I hope I didn't talk too fast. I know I can do that. And I'll entertain any board questions.
Are there any board questions on this presentation? All right, seeing none, are there any public comments on this presentation? All right, seeing none, this is not something that requires action
Nope.
from us this evening, so thank you for the presentation, and we will move on to the CTE Advisory Committee appointment.
Yes, so thank you very much. So as the cover sheet backup document state here, one of the things that we're required to do as part of receiving our CTE funding is to do a comprehensive local needs assessment with the participation of a CTE advisory committee that really is appointed by the board that sits over all of the industry sectors that we work with and all the pathways that we work with. All of the individual pathways have their own advisories, but this one will allow us to be sort of a global look at the CTE program in Dixon Unified. So as you can see, there's a number of names there recommended. I really want to thank, and I know I saw Bob, and I believe Rand is here as well. Bob Bugowski, assistant principal at Dixon High School, who's the admin who oversees CT over there, does a great job of organizing this. And really want to throw a shout out to Miranda Will as well, who's in the first year for us doing some teacher on special assignment work. Just done a great job of engaging our community and teachers over there to sort of take our CTE program to the next level. And so Miranda did, I think, most, if not all, the outwork to our friends in the community to join us here. So we seek your approval tonight of the advisory committee, and of course, we'll take any questions if you have them.
All right, are there board questions on the CTE advisory committee? DJ, go ahead.
Do they like provide a report to the board at some point when they're done meeting or something, or is it mostly internal, or how's that work?
Yeah, so the intent here would be to convene this committee, do the needs assessment, and then what I'd like to do is actually bring Mr. Bugowski back and Ms. Will back to give a presentation, not only on that, but on all the really cool stuff that's happening in the CTE over at Dixon High School.
All right, other board comments, questions? Lloyd, go ahead.
Just a comment. I like what I see here, the Career Technical Education Advisory Committee. But what I'd like to see in the future is an advisory committee called College and Career. So instead of separating them, we merge them together, working together. But for a first step, the Career Technical Education Advisory Committee is a good idea, and I plan to vote for it. Good job.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Other board comments, questions? All right, then I'm going to open for public comment on this item. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment and I will entertain a motion to approve. I will entertain a motion on this item.
So moved.
There is a motion. Is there a second on this item to approve the committee as proposed?
A second.
All right, there's a motion, a second. We'll do a roll call vote. DJ,
Aye.
Lucas,
Aye.
Jewel,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye.
and I as well. That motion passes. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, guys.
Together. All right, we are on to agenda items for future meetings. Do any board members have an agenda item for future meetings? Something you'd like to talk about, see presentations on? All right, moving on to board announcements. Are there any board announcements? All right, seeing none, our coming events, the next board meeting that we'll hold is April 15th. And I will now accept a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we're gonna do a roll call vote. DJ,
Aye.
Lucas, Jewel,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye.
and I as well. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
All right, 6:48. I'm impressed.
Mike's still